Are boundaries a scary thing for you to set in your relationships? Boundaries often have a negative connotation for many people. So instead of setting a boundary, they will ignore the problem. But what happens when you ignore your relationship problems? They grow. And you continue to get more and more frustrated. They become the big elephant in the room that everyone can see, but no one talks about. This is a problem that does not magically go away on its own. Remember, unresolved relationship problems will continue to grow. They need to have an intervention. As a spiritual medium, one of the fastest things that I watch pull you out of balance is relationship problems. They affect so many areas of your life so quickly and leave you spinning, literally. Relationship problems affect your whole life, but you're most likely going to notice them affecting your stress levels, how much sleep you'll get at night, and how much or how little you'll end up eating. They can even affect your performance level at work and make you moody around those that are trying to support you. You do not want relationship problems running away from you, and you can solve this with healthy boundaries. What is the purpose of a relationship boundary? Boundaries protect your energy and your relationships. Think about this. Boundaries let others know what is okay and what's not okay with you. Here's the thing about boundaries. What is not okay for you probably is okay for someone else, and vice versa. But no one knows this unless it's verbally communicated. Boundaries are not set in stone across all of your relationships. They are different with different people. It is very important that you tell out loud, not just in your head, what your specific boundaries are with the people in your life. If you feel like you're being pushy or aggressive, I'm going to bet that it's because drawing boundaries is unfamiliar to you. There is nothing wrong with telling people what is okay and what is not okay for you. Again, if you don't tell them, they don't know. The majority of the population cannot read your mind, and they're not good with hints. They need you to be very specific and very clear with what's good for you and what's not. If you set a boundary with someone and they ignore it or they make fun of you for it, that is your red flag. It's time for you to re-examine your relationship with this person, and we'll talk about that in this video too. Remember the golden rule. Do unto others as you want done unto you. That applies very well here. Not only do you want to let others know what your boundaries are, you want to know what their boundaries are. And this is just a quick reminder, don't forget to like this video, subscribe, and hit that notification bell so you know when each of my new videos drops. The first step is to set the boundary. The secret to setting a healthy boundary is that you have to enforce them, all of them. I can't stress how completely pointless it is to set a boundary and then not enforce it. At that point, it's like you didn't even set a boundary. This is where I see most people fall apart, is at enforcing the boundary, and that's why this is the #1 secret to setting a healthy boundary. Let's use the example of a child in the candy store. This is my favorite example. You can tell the child they can have one piece of candy, and for some kids, setting this boundary is going to be a big challenge. But we're going to set this boundary anyhow. So reminder, you can tell the reason for the boundary as long as it doesn't come across as a justification for the boundary. Justifying your boundary weakens them to the receiver. So let's say that the kid comes back to you with a bag full of candy. This is your telling moment. Do you ignore your boundary of the one piece of candy, or do you enforce it? If you enforce the boundary and say to the child, wow, you found so many great choices, but how many pieces of candy are you going to get right now? I'm laughing because this is what I would say to my kids when they were little. One piece of candy. So let's pick out that one that you want the most and let's put the others back. The child knows that you set the boundary and you meant it. If the child ignores your boundary and tries to have a temper tantrum for only getting one piece of candy, you have to decide what to do to keep enforcing your boundary. Personally, I know that as a child, I'd have gotten no candy. And I'm sure many of you can relate to that. Because if I kept pushing the boundary, then there was 0 rewards for breaking the boundary. But if you let the child get the whole bag of candy because you don't really care, or even worse, you don't want to create a scene, they're not going to listen to you. And when you set boundaries around the things that are really important, like being honest and respectful with you, they're not going to listen. Here's the thing about boundaries. If you're not going to enforce it, please stop wasting your time setting them. Don't. You create more problems for yourself, and the people in your life will have no idea what you actually want. When you set a boundary and you don't enforce it, you didn't set a boundary. Let that sink in. When you set a boundary and don't enforce it, you didn't set a boundary. You also set a precedent that you don't mean what you say. Then this quickly becomes a very confusing game of, do they mean this or do they not? So do you see why the secret to setting a healthy boundary is enforcing the boundary? No one wants to be confused. The more clear you are with your boundary setting and enforcing, the smoother things will go in your relationships. So what to do when they are ignoring your boundary enforcing? Sometimes you will come across a person that hears your boundary and they continue to ignore you when you enforce the boundary. What do? This is one of the most asked questions I get about enforcing boundaries. What do I do if they ignore me enforcing my boundaries? Well, it depends on who the person is, what the situation is, and what you want to do. Boundaries are set to tell people what's okay and what's not. So if they're ignoring the boundary and you're enforcing the boundary, it tells me more about them and the type of person that they are. If someone cares about you and you set a boundary with them, they should honor it. They want to be a part of your life, and they should not do anything intentionally to upset you. That's what people that really care about you want to do. They don't want to cause drama and rock the boat to intentionally trigger you. But having said that, boundaries are the hardest to set with family members. Family knows you better than anyone else. And sometimes they have a pattern of knocking you down and picking on you until you crumble. This isn't okay, by the way. It isn't okay for anyone to treat you in a way that hurts you. It's just more often than not, the people I hear struggle the most when you stand in your power and set a boundary is a family member who's used to having power over you. Family dynamics are the hardest. Don't you just love those family patterns, especially the generational ones? And this is followed by partners that you are in an unhappy relationship with. Typically, the most unhealthy relationships you have are often the ones that struggle with a boundary. If they've been able to do whatever they've wanted for as long as they've known you, they don't typically want to change that. They want to do what they know, whether it's healthy or not. And this gives you an opportunity to decide how you want to handle this. Do you need to create more space in this relationship? And if you go this route, make sure you communicate with them that the problem is them ignoring the boundaries you have set. If you leave a relationship without saying why, you're ghosting somebody, that creates more problems and karma for the two of you to deal with later. And I promise you, it is so much easier to deal with it right now. Ask yourself, is this relationship still a fit for you? Is this someone you still want to have in your life? Why and why not? Get really objective and make a list and decide if this relationship was for a reason, a season, and that time is up. Do you need to sit down and talk to them? It is very possible that no one has drawn a boundary with them before and they don't know how to respond. They may feel controlled. They have been that kid that was allowed to get that one piece of candy at the candy store and got the whole bag. Remember, boundaries tell others what is okay and not okay in your relationships together. They're good, and you should be using them in all of your relationships. The number one secret to setting healthy boundaries is to enforce the boundary. While it is harder to enforce the boundary than to set it, when you enforce a boundary and the other person respects it, it really does elevate that relationship. If someone ignores your boundary and you are enforcing the boundary, it's time for you to reevaluate your relationship and your interactions with this person going forward. Who are you going to start enforcing boundaries with in your life? It's time. Now that you know the number one healthy secret to boundary setting, I hope you create more balance in your relationships. If you enjoyed this video, like it, and be sure to check out my other videos where I'm sharing powerful practices to reclaim your time, relationships, mindset, and energy. Another good video for you to check out is my video on 7 signs you're settling for less. Check it out. The link is pinned in the comments below.